This is Thomas, a little tank engine with 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. He looks a little new to the island of Silver. Let's give him a tour. We'll start at Tidmouth, the terminus for the main line. Hopefully it'll look something like this eventually. Tidmouth station is where the express departs from, but it also has a bay platform for passengers wanting to travel up Duck's branch line. Across from the station are the mainline engine sheds, which has a big turntable and a back door that allows sick engines to go to the workbench. The sheds are also serviced by a coaling stage, which can be accessed by this steep track, and should eventually look like this. Next to them are the carriage sheds, which seem awfully small, but are actually just an entrance to a much larger yard, so rakes of coaches can be pulled out as needed. The diesel depot is set up similarly, to give the diesels a place to stay, while the turntable shed is typically for steam locomotives. Tidmouth is also home to the largest harbor on the island. It's here that the Flying Kipper departs, as well as other freight to leave Sodor by ship. This pier will have a large warehouse like in the books. The last track in Tidmouth also goes underneath the raised main line, down to a helix that leads somewhere. Across this little river brings us into Croven's Gate. There's storage for maintenance vehicles in the yard, across from where a larger workshop will be. On the other side of the main line is the Skarloey Railway Slate Exchange and the engine sheds. The narrow gauge main line begins appropriately at Croven's Gate Station here, where passengers can exchange from the big railway. There's also a junction by the river that climbs to the lift bridge. So in total, there's technically 3 main lines over this section. The uppermost one splits off by the bridge, goes through Marin, and around above the engine sheds, but I'll get to that and this other junction later. Past Croven's Gate and this bridge on the lower main line is Toby's Windmill and Cozy Cove. This is the main entrance to the layout, where 2 main lines cross the gap via bridges, one of them being the Vickerstown Bridge. The lower track leads into the Great Railway Show Yard, a place solely included for all my international engines to have a place to stay. The upper track goes to Vickerstown Station, with a little siding that goes to the mail depot. There's also a figure 8 tram loop here that I can leave a tram engine running on. It allows passengers to travel up and down between Vickerstown and this station that I'm hoping to build akin to the one seen in Stepney the Bluebell engine. So in the end, this will be a huge double-decker station. This track looks like a regular platform, but actually leads up past a little washdown and onto Kirkmachen, but more on that later. The Vickerstown engine sheds are here, and then both main lines join back up and lead into Kildane, the junction station for the Godred branch line. This is the cannon terminus for the line, so the electric engines live in a shed here. This little spur will go towards a boxed-in railway museum that will technically be underground, but I'll come back to that. To start at Kildane and go up the branch line, engines will have to go up a small helix here and continue to climb to Godred. So why is there 2 entrances to this branch line? Well, because Kirkmachen is here, and to reach its height, I had to start the branch for it way back at Vickerstown. Ideally, after leaving Kildane, you would go through Kirkmachen before reaching Godred, but this way everything fits and it acts as a secondary entrance to the branch line. So there's 2 electric branches that climb over a series of bridges and eventually meet up at Godred, but I'll get there shortly. Back on the main line, we reach Wellsworth, Edwards Station, and around the bend to Arlesboro Harbor. There's a sunken quay here, and it follows the main line into Arlesboro West. This is the terminus to Ducks Branch Line, and also the depot of the Arlesdale Railway, which runs on tedious Z-gauge track. The Z-scale system has some rolling stock storage here by the loop that leads up to the chute, and across from that are the engine sheds. To take passengers up to Arlesdale, they climb this curvy track past the turntable and into the loop, where Rex crashed once. The second turntable as well as Arlesdale Station is here. The large plateau behind the Arlesdale Railway is the aforementioned Godred, the highest standard gauge station on Sodor. There are aluminum works here and the narrow gauge transfer yards. Back on the ground, the main line goes past Arlesboro West Station, through Tidmouth Tunnel, and around to Knapford. There's a goods line that takes a single track route through a separate tunnel. In Knapford, there's a big shed where Emily used to live, and a quarry which is inspired by the Reverend's own layout. The main line splits here again, with this track going past Knapford Harbor, where Percy fell into the sea, back around to Tidmouth Station. The left track goes through a tunnel, which is actually Henry's tunnel on the other side, and gradually climbs above the sheds to Marin, and this mysterious junction. This is the last mainline junction, and it goes above the staging area and workbench, across this metal lift bridge, through the dual gauge tunnel to the gold mine, aka Bertram's home. From there we go over the viaduct, a few more small locations, but ultimately connect back to Godred. The narrow gauge line follows this all the way around from Croven's Gate, above the workbench, etc., and therefore links the Skarloey Railway ultimately to the Mid-Sodor. As I covered briefly, above this museum will be a Mid-Sodor layout similar to the way the Arlesdale Railway is above the main line. Otherwise, the museum space would pretty much just be empty. The narrow gauge line will go under the Godred line to Kirkmachen and do a loop shaped like this. The Culdee Railway will do a simple C-shaped loop above that, and the standard gauge line will run through it all back down to Vickerstown. It will look like this with all the tunnels in place. And that's pretty much the gist of it so far. It's a little ambitious, but I think the hardest parts are behind me. Just like my models, I typically don't shy away from the challenge.
What did I miss?